We learned a lot from tonight's Colts preseason win. It may not matter in the standings, but it mattered for several guys who were actually still fighting to make this team. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first/final listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. What is up, everybody? This is Jake Arthur and Zach Hicks of HorseshoeHuddle.com. And we are talking about this Colts victory today. It's a preseason game. Colts win 21-13. Yes, it doesn't really matter in the standings whatsoever, but it still makes you feel good to see the W. We sure know it makes you guys feel poorly to see a loss. So let's celebrate this win. But no, we're going to talk about guys today, guys who we feel are pretty safe on the roster who stood out. Because, again, this wasn't a day about the starters whatsoever. There were only a couple starters out there. But several guys who we know are going to be on the team who stood out, guys who are probably on the bubble or who have strong practice squad possibilities who stood out, and then guys who really need to bounce back in this last week to kind of rehab their image a little bit. But, Zach, let's go ahead and I'll open the floor to you. Who is someone you want to talk about first when you think of, safe roster guys who really played well tonight?
Yeah, I think the man of the hour that we really need to talk about is Nick Cross here, man. I mean, there's been a lot of talk this offseason, particularly on this podcast and in our comment sections and across all of Colts land here about what are the Colts doing at safety? Like, are they going to find that other starter alongside Julian Blackmon? Do they have a competent player to put out there alongside Julian Blackmon? And even us on this show, we've said go sign, your Justin Simmons and Quandre Diggs and all that, but we weren't totally out on Nick Cross by any means. It was more so like, can he give them the level of play that they need this season if they want to be a divisional contender this year or a playoff team this season? And I've liked what the Colts have done with Nick Cross these last two games, where last week when the starters did play a little bit, Cross got a lot of run at free safety alongside Julian Blackmon. And according to Gus Bradley, looked pretty good out there, did some good things, had a pass breakup in that game, a couple run stops, did some really good things in that one. And then he carried that momentum into this game where he's playing with mostly the backups, and he's starting this game at strong safety. So a completely different position, playing more at the box, more coming downhill. And we saw that turn into a couple tackles for a loss, a couple run stops, really running that alley really well. And I think this has been a very, very productive preseason for Nick Cross. And I know, look, I got to trust you guys, obviously, in training camp and what you guys are seeing in training camp. And, where, especially early in camp, the returns weren't that high on Nick Cross. But for what I've seen through two preseason games so far, I'm not saying I'm not I'm not saying that oh gosh, safety's perfect now. We're great at safety. But Nick Cross is making me a little bit more confident going into the season with how he's played in these two preseason games. So I like that the Colts are giving him some snaps. They're letting him showcase what he can do at both free safety and strong safety. And, props to Nick Cross for really showing out in these two preseason games, because he looked like a guy who did not deserve to be on the field tonight. And maybe that's part of why he was playing like a madman out there. But really good showing from Nick Cross, and makes me feel a little bit better about him going into the regular season.
Yeah, I still think at minimum they need to sign a veteran for depth, because it's if something happens to Julian Blackmon, you're screwed. There is still potential in Nick Cross, but it's something we're going to have to see first. This isn't his first strong preseason. I am still optimistic about what he can provide. I really think I like him best at strong safety. Just keeping those things in front of him and just taking away that front half of the field seems to suit him really well. For what it's worth, I tried to get Shane to declare him the winner of the other safety battle tonight, and it didn't work because, for all intents and purposes, he's gotten the vast majority of the first team reps at the other safety other than Julian. Again, we can't say free or strong because it keeps fluctuating. But I asked Shane, I was like, is it fair to say that Nick has won the other starting safety role and you guys are just trying to figure out what it's going to look like? And he said they're still leaving it up for the final week. They're going to let these guys battle it out, which, whatever. But I think it's still going to be Nick Cross unless they sign somebody.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, he's done really positive things. I mean, he's done his job. I mean, there's not much more he could have done. I mean, there was the mishap with the short touchdown last week, but it didn't seem egregious like the end of the world. It seemed like, I don't know, maybe just a young player mistake. But I mean, that stuff will come back to bite you in the regular season. But again, like it wasn't some deep downfield blown coverage. Like it didn't have some big, huge red flag attached to it.
Yeah.
I really like what I saw. I thought he was all over the field. He was doing a lot of everything today, and really good returns for him. Another young defender who the Colts almost as bad need to step up is Adetomiwa Adebawore. He was really good today. I almost want to lump like him and Isaiah Land together, but we'll talk about Land in the next segment. But shoot, he had like at least one sack, and I think he had 2 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hits. Like Ade was everywhere tonight, and he was just super active. It seemed peak Ade. He was going sideline to sideline, which defensive tackles aren't necessarily supposed to always be able to do. But no, I thought he was really active and just really harassing the backfield tonight. And again, looked like one of those guys who is everybody, like he's playing out of his league. Like he's a varsity player playing JV. He kind of looked like that tonight.
Yeah, for sure. He was a big standout in this one. Fantastic preseason so far from Adetomiwa, and I think he's really climbing himself up into that role where it's like you got to get him out there for a couple of actual like regular season pass rushing snaps because he's shown the ability to win with that bull rush, win with his speed, and also get off blocks a little bit better this preseason. So Adetomiwa Adebawore, man, this is a guy who had sky high potential when the Colts drafted him, and he's starting to really figure it out as a pass rusher. So great preseason so far from him. One more guy I did want to mention here too, because we just love this guy to death and we won't spend too much time on him, but Segun Olubi all over the field out there, really looking like the Colts' third linebacker. And another player where it's like, okay, he got his couple snaps out there with the backups, but this is clearly a guy who's in that in-between phase of better than backups, maybe not quite a starter. Segun Olubi did some really good things out there. And I just love watching the way he plays football, man. So Segun Olubi, awesome preseason game. I think he had like 6 or 7 tackles in like 2 series that he played out there.
Yeah, he led the team in tackles, of course, which you come to expect because he's one of those guys that plays with his hair on fire. He is kind of reminiscent of a young Zaire Franklin when Franklin was out there because we didn't know Franklin would become this.
Right.
But no, he hits hard. He is very rangy, fast. His closing speed is great. I know the chief concern like last summer with the defensive staff, Richard Smith and Gus Bradley, was really being able to digest what was in front of him and be able to predict run or pass and things like that. And, he got that start against Carolina last year. He doesn't seem like a guy to me that's playing catch up. He doesn't seem out of place. His closing speed helps in some of that, but I don't ever think that he seems behind at the 8 ball at all. Like I think he very much is within the flow and even dictates it sometimes like this, leading the team in tackles and just swarming to the ball, getting there quicker than everybody else.
Yeah, for sure. And a couple more players I want to touch on because I think all these players end up making the roster. Maybe something crazy happens and one of them doesn't, but I do think all 4 of these players will make it. Sam Ehlinger, another good showing. Could have been a little bit better if he had better offensive line play on his left side in front of him. But Sam Ehlinger did some really good things, made some magic happen on that 3rd down throw to Tyree Cleveland in the first quarter. Tyler Goodson and Evan Hull, I thought both of them were fantastic in this one, over 5 yards a carry for both players. Goodson on that touchdown run really showcased his speed, his explosion, especially on that jump cut. So really good things from both those running backs. And then Tanner Bortolini, one of the few standouts on the offensive line. We do all expect Bortolini to make this team. Obviously, a rookie 4th round pick, did some really good things at center and hopefully avoided a big injury with that toe scare. But it does sound like it's not that big of a deal. So Tanner Bortolini, stock is up for him. He looks like he's really growing into that position and playing some good snaps there at center.
Yeah, he definitely seems safe to me. He's a guy who has bounced back and forth between second and third string, but I think it's just so they can also get Danny Pinter some of those snaps as well. But yeah,
Right.
I feel like Bortolini is pretty safe. Coming up next, we're going to talk about guys who maybe need a little, they're on the bubble. They need a little more assurance, but they did themselves some favors tonight. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer that you get to first pitch. I know here in Indy, for pro baseball, we have to go to Chicago, Cincinnati, places like that. But Gametime actually will hook you up with tickets for the Indians as well here in Indy. So no excuse for it not to be MLB. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime just takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. They have their last-minute deals, which means that you save up to 60% off of buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever. They've got the zone deals. You save even more when you choose a section, and then you let Gametime pick the seats for you in that section. And then views from your seat. Obviously, no one wants to get to the venue and see that your view is cheeks. Like, you get to see a panoramic view right there before you buy. Test it before you buy it. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
And thank you all for making Locked On Colts your first listen today and every day. And for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get daily insight into the best fantasy draft strategy so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Night without mentioning my guy, Jason Bean. So quarterback Jason Bean, to tell you guys how good of a game he had in this one, my comments on Twitter have been just flooded with people being like, we got to make Jason Bean QB3. I don't know if he can make it through waivers. Look, he's going to make it through waivers, guys. He's not going to make this team. He will be. I think he'll be the Colts practice squad quarterback this season. And he's really showed out this entire offseason. I mean, Jason Bean, I think it was Greg Doyle who wrote an article on it the other day that said, like, the Colts at this point expected to move Jason Bean to wide receiver by this point in camp. Like, they started him at quarterback because that's what he had played, and they were expecting to move him to receiver by some point in camp, but he's just shown out enough at quarterback to where they wanted to keep him at that position, and it showed tonight that he even got the bulk of the snaps, led 2 touchdown drives, and one of them he capped off with a 1-yard touchdown run. Jason Bean's had a really good preseason, a really good offseason for the Colts, and you guys know I love Jason Bean. I loved him as a player in college, but turning that love of a college player into like, hey, this guy could be a decent practice squad player for the Colts has been really cool to see. So Jason Bean, man, hats off to what he's done this offseason and shown enough at quarterback to stick at that position and show the Colts like, hey, I can be this mobile quarterback for your practice squad that you spent all of last season looking for. They brought in who was that bust quarterback that was taken?
Kellen Mond.
Kellen Mond, yes. Yeah. I love that you had that so quick. Kellen Mond, they brought Kellen Mond on the practice squad for a little bit because they were looking for that mobile guy on the practice squad. I think Jason Bean could be the guy they've been looking for, and I love that. I mean, it's been awesome to watch him this preseason. He's going to make it through waivers if the Colts waive him. No one's going to roster him as like their backup or anything like that. So Jason Bean, I think he's going to be the Colts practice squad quarterback this year.
Yeah, no, he's flashed a ton of potential in these moments. I love a guy who has the magic to him, guys who can make something happen out of nothing when the play totally breaks down. Like, I fall in love with those type of guys. And of course, his mobility, he's better at, like, he's very still erratic as a passer, I feel, yes, but he is better and more able to be put on the field than I thought he was going to be when I first saw him play out like during OTAs. With that said, I am still kind of a Keaton Slovis guy. Like, there was the play he made tonight where they were backed up like around their own 20 or something, and he just kind of sidestepped a defender and hit one of the receivers. I can't think of who it was. I think it was Greg Ward for like a 15 or 20 yard dig route over the middle of the field. I was like, oh my God, I loved every second of that play. But that's just the kind of stuff. I am partial to Keaton Slovis. I think in terms of like, if you're looking for a direct replacement for Sam Ehlinger, it would probably be Slovis. But for the purpose of having that like X factor type of player who could truly help you prepare for like the Lamar Jacksons of the world on your scout team, you have to have a Jason Bean like that.
Yeah.
So I see utility in both players. Like, you don't often carry multiple quarterbacks on the practice squad, but I could see the Colts doing it.
Yeah, for sure. And mentioning another player who has a good chance of making it to the practice squad, the Colts really like this guy, undrafted free agent last year, Xavier Scott. Man, take a bow.
Mm-hmm.
That was a fun showing from him, and he showed contact balance. He showed the vision. He showed just the elusiveness, and this is a pretty sturdy player at like 215, 220 pounds too.
Mm-hmm.
Played a lot of wide receiver in college. Xavier Scott, man, that was a great showing from him. He had a lot of, I think he had like 3 or 4 runs that went over like 9 yards in this game too. Like really, really great showing. Him and Jason Bean were doing some work on those 2 touchdown drives there in the third quarter. So Xavier Scott, he's not going to make the roster, I don't think, but really good showing from him in this one for sure.
Yeah, and he averaged a legit 5 yards per carry. Like you said, there were multiple big runs on this, but 11 carries and averaging 5 yards a carry. That's great. Just the run game in general tonight was awesome. Talked a bit about Goodson and Hull, but the Colts ran for 166 yards tonight, 4.5 yards per carry. Each of Scott, Goodson, and Hull averaged at least 5 yards a carry, so that's awesome for that group. Definitely, we're fans of Xavier Scott, but again, I think it's probably going to have to be a practice squad situation. A guy we have to talk about who may not be necessarily a bubble guy with the injury to Samson Ebukam, Isaiah Land, I think has a really good chance to get on the roster. He's one of those guys who gets some reps during those developmental periods of practice. And again, looks like varsity playing against the JV kids. Looked like it tonight. He had 1 sack. He had another couple quarterback hits. He also had a tackle for loss. Like him, he was the defensive end version of Ade tonight. Like, I think they both just had a terrific night. Land is showing a lot of good stuff as an edge rusher. And you and I were talking about this before we came on. Like, it's hard to keep him off because he's literally developing and going at the trajectory the Colts would have hoped when they got him last year. So he's doing his part. He's getting better all the time. He's flashing all the time. I mean, what else do you need? Like, he's a young, super athletic edge rusher who was incredibly productive in college, and that often translates somehow to the NFL. Like, it manifests in some way to the NFL. Those guys don't often just totally flame out. Like, he could probably bring them something. Like, he's not going to factor into the rotation heavily because that is a really deep group, but that's a guy you could have on the roster, and he's inactive pretty much every week.
Yeah, and I think his run defense is pretty underrated too. He had a couple of good plays in this one. He had one, I think it was on a toss play to his side where he beat the tight end Chip on the inside, forced the run wide, and then I believe it was Micah Abraham came crashing in and forced the running back to stop for a second, and Land got the tackle for a loss. But it's just stuff like that. He's been a good run defender too. So Land, yeah, that's a player you don't give up on. Like, do not give up on that player there. Another player I wanted to mention real quick, though, undrafted free agent Dalton Tucker. I know he played until the very end of this one, but that's more so because of, the depth of the offensive line. They don't have another guard behind him to play. But Dalton Tucker, man, he was out there from beginning of the game to the very end. And he was one of the few non-leaky parts of the offensive line. I really didn't see many rushes getting around him in the run game. Obviously the run game was very successful in this one, and he was part of that. So Dalton Tucker's impressed me, man. Look, for my money, I would put Dalton Tucker on this roster over Josh Sills. I think that's the way to go for the Colts. I don't know if they're going to ultimately do that, but Dalton Tucker, to me, in these 2 preseason games, has shown more than Josh Sills, and honestly probably shown a little bit more than Danny Pinter as well. So Dalton Tucker, I think, for me, should make this roster.
I would agree with that. I think with Wesley French going out, it opened a door for one of those guys who is able to play along the interior to make it. And it's, it could be 2 of Sills, Pinter, or Tucker, but I'm with you. I think Tucker would be my guy as well.
Yeah, and then a couple other guys we want to touch on who I think are going to be practice squad guys this year, but they've had good preseasons. They have a chance. I love Jonah Lawalu's just range, his effort, his athleticism. He's done some really good things in these 2 games. Still very, very raw, but some really good things with his effort and his athleticism. And then Austin, we said this last week, Ajaki. Okay, Austin Ajaki at linebacker has been the linebacker that stood out to me a ton with that like 3rd, 4th team unit. Shown some things on special teams, did some good things in the run game on defense. He's had a good preseason as well, and I think he's going to be a prime practice squad guy for the Colts.
Yeah. So with that said, it's time to turn time to turn the page a little bit and talk about some guys who got some work to do. They got some rehabbing to do on their image tonight. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals who are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. This is the time of year where the most NFL players will be hitting LinkedIn Jobs to check things out within the next few weeks, everybody. And for them, LinkedIn isn't just a job board. They actually help you hire professionals who you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but who might be open to the perfect role elsewhere. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even check out other leading job sites. And on LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So to put it plainly, if you ain't looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Zach, let's go ahead and get to the unfun parts first. This first guy, we'll fly through it because I know you don't want to talk about him, but we have to because it would be irresponsible not to. Matt Gay missed 2 more kicks tonight. He kind of has the perfect built-in excuse because Rigoberto was not here tonight. Congratulations. He and his wife welcomed a baby girl today. But Matt Gay did not have his holder today. So Spencer Schrader, undrafted free agent, kicker, punter, holder, everything. This was his first time holding ever. And so Matt Gay missed 2 field goals tonight. That would be great if it was just tonight, but this is not isolated. He missed a kick last week. Ever since he popped up on the injury report for that like one day with the hip injury last year, things have not been the same. And that's really, you have, like, it's unavoidable. Like, that is pretty much a fact. He's been missing field goals at a higher rate than he was previously then. Shane Steichen tonight said, he thinks everything's going to be fine. Matt Gay's a pro. Boilerplate language. But yeah, that's something we're going to keep an eye on because, like, kicker problems is a big problem as we've seen in the past. Going past that, Zach, who else do you think had a not chill night tonight?
I will say my one thing on kickers real quick. Here's the thing with kickers, man. Every kicker has the one day in their life where they just forget how to do their job and they become the worst thing in the entire world at kicking. Every single kicker has it. It can be at age 20. It can be at age 30. It can be at age 40 like Vinatieri. We don't know when it's going to happen. So hopefully this is not it for Matt Gay, but we'll see. It's just bound to happen when it comes to kickers. But talking about other guys who did not have great showings in this one, the Blake Freeland preseason has been rough. Like, woof. Like, it got to the point in this one where I was almost like, no, I wasn't even almost like, I was certainly like, if we want to evaluate this offense, we got to get Blake Freeland out of the game. Like, at the end of the first half, like, the amount of pressures he was giving up, it's like, all right. And here's the thing, too. When they went into quarter 3, Gonsalves was still in there at right tackle. And all the same second-team offensive line was still out there, except for Blake Freeland. And it wasn't because he got benched. It was because he's the 6th offensive lineman. You know? So that's the fear right there, is he's very, very safe on this roster. And he's had just a brutal preseason. Like, brutal, it would be like a compliment even to how he's played this preseason. It has just not looked good whatsoever. The strength is not there. The stopping his feet every time he makes contact, dropping his head. Guys are beating him to the edge. They're beating him inside. I don't know what the solution is here, but if we have another season like last year where he needs to play 700 snaps on offense, what he's shown this preseason is not good whatsoever. So I'm scared, man. I'm scared. This has been an awful preseason for Blake Freeland.
The practices weren't much better, so I'm not going to act like this was an isolated thing either against the Cardinals. It wasn't any better during practice. Someone who just kind of an abridged version of a night, but it didn't go well. Juju Brents, he was only even playing because he didn't get to play last week. And on the first play of the game, he gets a defensive pass interference call, 10 yards, boom. He had a missed tackle on a play where the running back would ultimately go for a 19-yard gain. And then he hurt his nose, like at the end of the day. He's got stitches in it. It looks kind of gnarly. I guess he doesn't know if it's broken yet or not, but not a great night for Juju. That's not someone I'm overly concerned with. The only thing I'm concerned with him really is injuries.
Yeah.
But as far as play on the field, tonight wasn't great. But he's not someone I'm really concerned about. Someone who kind of falls into that same bucket is Galani Woods. He's really needed to have a strong last couple weeks, and he did not get to play the full game tonight. He left, I think, with a toe injury as well. I will say when he was out there tonight, though, I did think his blocking looked pretty good. I noticed a couple times where he had really nice blocks. He had one for, I think it was Sam Ellinger had a nice run to the boundary, and Galani was there to kind of seal off the edge for him. So I did think probably the best area you would want to see Galani improve, which is blocking. I thought he had a couple nice plays before he left for the day.
He did. I think he's actually had a good preseason when he's played, but it's just getting to the point with Galani where this coaching staff has ties to the other 4 tight ends. They were part of drafting of Will Mallory, and they used the other 3 guys heavily last year. Like, they love the other 3 guys. 2 of them didn't even play tonight. Those are the 2 guys who are locks for the roster, and Mo Alley-Cox and Kylan Granson. And Drew Ogletree only played like 4 snaps. Like, he's making the team as well. Down to Mallory and Woods for that final tight end spot. And again, this coaching staff was part of drafting Will Mallory. They weren't part of drafting Galani Woods. They didn't get to see him much last year. And from what we've heard from you guys, from Stephen Holder, actually put it out on Twitter the other day, where it's been a very underwhelming camp from Galani Woods as well.
Yeah.
It's tough. Like, they're not going to keep 5 tight ends. And it feels like Galani Woods is the guy out. And it's like, he needed to be out there tonight to show his worth. And it's like, he wasn't out there. And personally, for me, I wouldn't give up on Galani at this point. I think it's too early to do that. The athletic profile is too good. And the way that he's shown his blocking these last 2 games, I'm very optimistic about his blocking. But it gets to the point where, this coaching staff's going to look at what they have. And like, for Galani, like, they've barely seen him. And when they've seen him, mostly in the camp setting, it's been, as you guys and Holder like put out there, it's like been fairly underwhelming. So like, I don't think he's going to make this team. Like, maybe I'm crazy just from an outsider's view here, but like, I feel like a trade might be coming in the next week or 2. Like, I don't see the path for him making this team with this staff right now. Maybe things change and they just, at the end of the day, Ballard puts his foot down and says, no, we're not giving up on him yet. But like, from the way everything is looking from the outside looking in, I don't think he's going to make this roster.
Yeah, I'm not quite ready to declare that. But like, you laid out every like reasonable argument for it. Like, I can see that scenario where he doesn't make it. I just wonder if they try to find a way to keep 5 tight ends so they don't have to make that decision of, do we get rid of Galani or Will Mallory?
Right.
I think that's 2 guys they really don't want to part with. And I think they see there's still so much potential with Woods. Like, let's get him to normal after he missed all of last year. I don't know. I just don't think they would want to part with him. But again, you laid out so many reasons as to why that would even be a possibility. I don't know. It's tough, but like, because the things make him great, he hasn't really showed them in camp. Yeah. Like, we all keep clutching on to these big plays that he made as a rookie, but that hasn't been happening in camp and practices, that hasn't been happening out here in the preseason games. It's like, so if the thing that made you different than everybody else isn't showing up, then what's there to latch onto?
Right. It's just, it's a tough conversation. I understand both sides of it. Like, again, in my head, I'm like, I would not cut Galani Woods. I just wouldn't do. I would prefer to waive Will Mallory even, or, I know we'd all say Mo Cox at this point. I know we'd all say it at this point. It's not happening. But I don't know. The vibes are weird, man. The vibes are weird with it. A lot of special team snaps for Galani Woods too, where Mallory, it's mostly just offense. And maybe that says that they view Woods as more of a bottom of the roster guy and Mallory as more of a practice squad guy. But it could mean the other way, where they want to get Mallory more offensive snaps and they're going to just throw Woods on special teams so he can showcase for other teams. Like, I don't really know how to dissect this. All I do know about tight end right now is Mo Cox, Kylan Granson, Drew Ogletree are completely safe. 100% safe, those three. And do they keep 4 or 5, or do they keep Mallory or Woods or what here? I don't know with the tight end spot, but luckily, guys, we have all week to discuss that tight end room. That is it for our post-game review. I appreciate all 90 of you guys here on the live stream still here past midnight. We are 2 old men, so we need to go to bed here in a second, but I do want to thank you guys for showing up for this live stream here. And thank you guys for always making Locked On Colts your first listen every day. Now go listen to the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast and get daily insight into the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. If you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider and chat directly with us to get that inside scoop, follow the link in our show notes. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at ZachHicks2, all on Twitter. We're also on TikTok and Instagram. Jake runs those accounts, so you can see him fighting with a rooster on those accounts. It's a very fun time. Also subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here on Monday afternoon.